name is India, and I thought I would sit down and talk about the books that I've read since quarantine began. I have seen videos like this going around. It's a wrap up. It's a wrap up. This is a quarantine book wrap up. But I thought I would get on here and talk about those books that I've read now that I've been stuck at home for a while. First up, really the start of my quarantine reading is Milkman by Anna Burns. This I will always think of as the beginning of my quarantine reading journey because I listened to it on audiobook as I was driving home from college. I packed up my car at the end of March, or like before the last week of March, and drove back to Boise. And while I was doing so, I listened to Milkman. Milkman is about a young woman living in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and she starts to be followed by this paramilitary called the Milkman. I really enjoyed this book. This is also like the first time I've ever read an audiobook or listened to an audiobook in my adult reading life, which feels like I'm late to the game, but I've been enjoying it. The next book that I read was On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. This is a graphic novel about a crew on a spaceship who go around to ruins and like abandoned space cities and fix stuff and then like go to their next job. And it was so good. It's also about this girl who is reflecting back on this relationship that she had with another girl in her school. And this book is, I think, thematically largely about grieving relationships that we've lost or left behind, whether those are romantic or relationships we had with our family or our friends, and like leaving home. It reminded me a lot, tone-wise, to We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. Also, the covers, kind of similar. Not really. Okay. The next 3 books I read for school because I was finishing school at home via Zoom. Fun times. The first 2 were for my Virginia Woolf class. I read Orlando, which is about Orlando, who was born a boy in Elizabethan England and just continues to live until the present day, which at the time it was written was 1929. But yeah, just exists, writes poetry, transforms into a woman. This book is dedicated or like written for Vita Sackville West. This is my least favorite Virginia Woolf book, surprisingly. As much as I love queer narratives, as much as I love this idea of experimenting with biographical form, I cannot stand the writing. Reading Orlando makes me miss reading her other books. So, I also read The Years, which is very long and follows the Pargeter family, specifically the children. I think there are like 6 or 8 kids. And it starts off with the death of their mother and continues for 60 years. It continues for a long time until the children are older and they have young nephews and nieces who are talking to them, or children. This book is largely about family relationships and sibling relationships. I think potentially one of my favorite things about this book, or my favorite character, is Rose, who's kind of a minor character. She's one of the Pargeter children, but she's a suffragette, and I don't think I've ever read a book that features a suffragette, and it's just kind of slipped in there. Like, it'll talk about her being in prison, or her like throwing bricks or like destroying post boxes, and every time I would read a little bit about her, I'd be like, yes, Rose, you got it. The last thing I read in school was Kiss by Guillermo Calderon. And I read this for my global theater course. Kiss is about a white theater troupe that is putting on this play that they discovered that's written by this Syrian playwright. and they're putting it on, and then in the middle of the show they stop and they have a Skype conversation with the playwright, and they realize everything they thought they knew about this play, all of their interpretations, the way that they've been going about it, were wrong. Interesting. We read this play and talked about the ethics of intercultural theater and what it means for a white American theater troupe try to perform a piece of theater from a culture that's distant from their own, but also like the implications of getting it wrong. Onto the books I read after I graduated. Wow, pat on the back for me. I read Tinkers by Paul Harding. More importantly, I finished Tinkers by Paul Harding. I started it in January. I would read like 3 pages at a time throughout being at school, which is really not my favorite way to read books, but this is a slow literary novel that follows 2 timelines. One, a son who is older and he's dying and he's on his deathbed and he's surrounded by his family, and the other timeline is his father when he's like in middle age, who is a tinker and like drives a horse and cart around to different people who are living alone in the wilderness, providing goods to them. I didn't really like this book. I enjoyed the writing at certain points, and I was like, this feels like something that I would read in an English class because it's written pretty well, or like a creative writing class. But I think the way that I read it was not conducive to enjoying it. So it's not the book's fault. Mostly it's my fault. But even then, I don't know. I then read Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, which is about a murder that happens on the Orient Express, and Hercule Poirot, don't come for me, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry. The detective, the French detective, hence why I can't pronounce his name, has to figure out who done it. Whenever I'm in a reading slump, or I don't know what to read, or I want to read something that's not going to be too emotionally taxing, I do find that whenever I pick up one of her books, I enjoy it. All right, I'm back. It's a new day and I'm finishing up this video. Continuing on with books that I've read. I finally have 2 books with me physically. So I then read All Men of Genius by Lev A.C. Rawson. This is a steampunk retelling of Twelfth Night by Shakespeare and The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. This is about Violet, who is living in Victorian England and really wants to go to this prestigious mechanical and science school called Illyria. However, they only accept boys as students, so she dresses up as a boy, takes her twin brother's name, and goes there. This was really fun to read. There's a little bit of romance, there's a little bit of queerness, but mostly it's about Violet trying to prove that women deserve a place at this school, while also uncovering some of the dark secrets. For me, this hit, like, some of the commentary about gender and sexuality hit a little bit too on the nose. Like, I wish there was a little bit more subtlety. The last book I'm going to talk about is Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Ship. This is set in 17th century Holland, and follows a young woman who becomes a maid at Vermeer's house. She's tasked with cleaning his artist studio, and that's what it's about. I love historical fiction. Always have, probably always will. I think I need to read more historical fiction because I love it so much. This gave a great insight into the sexual politics and power dynamics between you know, someone who owns a house and someone who's working in that house, and just men trying to take advantage of young women. Also, there's a point where it talks about a plague and quarantining, which was a little bit too real, but you know, I wasn't expecting it and I was surprised. Great, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know some books that you've read over the past couple months. I plan to make a June wrap up. I plan to start filming wrap-ups. Woohoo! So you'll get a look at some more books that I've been reading recently. So yeah, thank you. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.